In the remainder of this presentation, we'll look at the foundation setup, the policy setup, and then the activities which you can perform with this system. For the foundation setup, we'll look at the following: employers, org structure, employee or pay groups, job classification, banks and bank accounts, third-party payees, chart of account structure, GL accounts. Interact HRMS is an enterprise application that can be used in any industry and in organizations of any size. In fact, the larger and more complex your business is, the more you will benefit from the use of Interact HRMS. You can define any number of employers in Interact HRMS. Employers are companies or organizations which have their own HR department, their own business rules, and which operate independently from other companies. They can be set up within a single database, even though the data will be kept separate and employers can never see each other's data. Or they can be set up with completely separate database instances, so the data is physically separated and not just functionally. When you define the enterprise in Interact HRMS, you can choose how many employers you want to define. If you're a conglomerate or group of companies or multi-agency government body, you may want to define different employers, which are each run independently, but still share many common elements. Creating a new employer can be done quickly in Interact because you can choose to inherit a lot of foundation and policy setup from the enterprise level, in which case there is no need for doing a new setup at the employer level. For example, you can see here that while creating a new employer, you can inherit employee groups, GL setup, job catalog, payroll definitions, cost centers, fund types, employee contract types, job grades and steps, leave definitions, and benefit providers. In addition to this, you can also have the employer created with a standard setup of the payroll, including taxes, compensation and deduction policies, leave policies, and much more. In other words, these employers can be auto-populated with any set of standard settings from the start to minimize the effort required to configure the employer and start hiring employees. Once employers are defined, we can go and define the rest of the foundation at the enterprise level, or if we just have one employer, we can define it at the employer level. Let's look at the organization structure. The organization structure is very powerful and flexible. It supports matrix reporting structures with multiple reporting lines, including administrative, functional, and technical reporting lines, or even a user-defined reporting line. You will find across all foundation elements in Interact that classification is very strong and flexible. The purpose of classification and grouping in a system such as Interact is to enhance the structure of the data so that the manual workload of the users is reduced through automation. In order to have automation, you need clear structure and rules. Basically, the structure is created through the foundation setup, and the rules are set up using policies. You can see that each organization unit can be grouped and classified in multiple ways. You can associate each unit with a user-defined organization group. You can link it with an organization type or a work unit type, and then you can define the organization unit as a company, branch, division, department, section, project, activity, and more. There are no limits on the number of units you can define, the number of reporting lines, or the number of reporting levels. Interact HRMS can support complex multi-location, multi-country, and multi-company organizations, but it can also be used for a very straightforward single company. The organization structure is ultimately used for managing data access. You decide which users can access data for which org units, determining workflow, which HR actions need to be approved by who, payroll costing. Organization units can be used as cost centers, and payroll cost allocation can be done by contract, project, or activity. Managing reporting. Any report in Interact can be filtered by org unit, and org group or org type, and self-service. Each unit can have their own self-service. so the administrative workload is spread across the company. Organization management also supports tracking of position budgets by unit, creating user-defined org charts, tracking performance goals, and strategic goals for each unit, and tracking risk. Once the org structure is defined, we will define the employee groups. These employee groups are known as pay groups in most payroll systems, but we use the generic term employee group since they cover much more than payroll in our system. Creating employee groups is an essential form of classifying employees in order to make it easier to assign common payroll, time, and leave policies upon hiring. Employee groups are heavily used across the payroll module, as all payroll-related actions can be done for one employee or for an entire employee group, or for a selection of multiple employee groups, which we call a virtual employer. Within the same employer, you can create any number of employee groups. Each such employee group can have its own unique setting as it relates to payroll, including whether these employees are salaried, hourly, or piecework employees. You can choose the default work hours, shift, pay calendar, GL account structure, GL interface, and much, much more. These employee groups are at the heart of the inheritance system in Interact, which automatically assigns policies to employees. Employee groups allow the user to control access to data. Specific users can only access the data of specific employee groups. Using employee groups, you can divide the work among payroll staff and implement a maker-checker operating model. All reports in Interact contain an employee group filter, so choosing your employee groups carefully will dramatically simplify your work and make extracting the correct reports more efficient. Job classification is part of the foundation of Interact because it touches all aspects of the system. For payroll purposes, all you would need is a job code and a job title, so you can hire employees and start paying them. But for strategic HR and talent management, the job classification is a real treasure trove. You can see that this is a whole library of data that can be captured on jobs, including a classification in group, class, and category, in addition to country-specific classifications, such as EEO or industry classifications. On top of this, you can define a huge number of additional elements about each job, and that includes the many tabs up here, which cover grade and setup structure related to the job, job description, job requirements in terms of education, skills, competencies, certifications, and experience. All of this will help you streamline and speed up your recruiting processes if you use Interact's recruitment module also. That's why you can define even the interview questions to be asked of any candidate for this job. You can define what training an employee in this job should take. You can define a default labor allocation rule to be applied to anyone holding this job title. And if your pay structure is point-based instead of grade-based, you can follow the Hey Job evaluation method or set up any other user-defined point-based pay structure method you want to follow. Because Interact's payroll module will generate the electronic file that goes to your bank to process the actual payment to your employees, you can define any number of banks and bank accounts, both those used by the employer as well as the employee's own accounts. A single employee can be paid from multiple employer bank accounts and receive the pay in multiple employee bank accounts using multiple currencies even. Interact Payroll doesn't just pay employees. It can also pay pensioners and other beneficiaries, including benefit carriers and tax agencies, or, in the case of garnishments, even spouses, courts, and student debt holders. In other words, you can set up any choice of payee and categorize them as needed. The third-party payables module together with the garnishment module and payroll module work seamlessly together. Payments can be made directly from payroll or can be posted to your finance system's accounts payable module. The last key elements to be defined as part of the foundation setup of Interact are the GL account structure and the associated GL accounts. As you can see, the system supports out-of-the-box 11 segments for the GL structure and this structure can differ based on the group for which payroll is run. Payroll cost distribution is very powerful in Interact and can be set up as required. You can define any number of GL accounts, associate each pay element with a separate GL account, and achieve very granular and detailed reporting and cost allocation this way. Once you have defined your GL structure and GL accounts, you can create GL account sets, which will be applied to your choice of employees, whose payroll cost should be allocated as such. Before we go through the product in detail, I want to show briefly how we navigate through Interact HRMS. Interact has more than 80 modules, each of which come with many policy menus, activity menus, and reports. Therefore, there are literally thousands of menus which you need to be able to access easily, depending on what your role is in the system. For this reason, we have many ways of getting to the functionality that you need. If you look at this desktop, you will see at the top here the search bar. It allows you to type keywords for what you are looking for, and the system will suggest to you the various options which include those words. As long as you know what it is called more or less, you can find it quickly. There's no faster way to get to a form you hadn't planned for than this way, because all you need to do is type some of it. If you can't think of the words to the menu, then you can instead scroll and go look for it in a logical manner, based on the context of what you are looking for. For this, you will just toggle and use the regular drop-down menu and Interact. These are the same menus that normally appear in the search bar, but in this case, they are organized logically, based on their purpose and functional content. First policies, then activities, HR actions, talent activities, reports, and then technical matters such as workflow, maintenance, and integration. Mind you that in the menu setup, you have the option to change the sequence in which menus are displayed, so you can choose to have specific menus at the top of the list to avoid having to scroll for them if these are menus which you access frequently. However, it's obvious that the fastest way to find 1 out of 800 reports is to use our search bar, where you just type, for example, leave request rep, and you'll get all the reports related to leave requests. Now, for the most commonly used functionality, our home screen gives you immediate access. From here, you can go straight to payroll and start a payroll process, or you can go right into the leaves and enter a new leave request for an employee. In addition, the menus on the left here are configured so that your favorite and frequently used menus are always available as you need them. On the left top, you will see some of the key building blocks of Interact, which you can access with one click: organizations, employee groups, jobs, managers, employees, projects, teams, clients, applicants, recruiters, locations, and equipment. All of this is what we call the employer-level access. Different users can be given different access of this same interface, and the employees themselves will have their own access when using employee self-service, which will be different from this access.